Namaskar and welcome to my class once again. Today we shall discuss another of Joseph Addison's essays. The title of the essay is Six Papers on Wheat. This is essay number 2. This was published in the Spectator on the 8th of May 1711. Let us find out what he says about false wheat. Joseph Addison says there is another kind of false wheat. He says another example of false wheat are the lipogrammatists. They flourished in the same early ages of the world. If you remember the last essay, he said that these types of writing flourished hundreds of years ago, and the present writers, some of the present writers are trying to revive some of those forms once again. So these lipogrammatists also flourished during those early periods. What are lipogrammatists? Lipogrammatists are letter droppers of antiquity. Antiquity is very old. Letter droppers of the past. What exactly did they do? They would take an exception against some particular letter in the alphabet without any particular reason. So without any particular reason, they dropped a few letters from the poems they wrote. They did not write, they did not take into account that particular letter which they decided to leave, to discard. They didn't use the letter even once in the entire poem. The writer gives the example of Tryphiodorus. He says Tryphiodorus was a great master of this kind of writing. He was a great lipogrammatist. He composed an epic poem on the adventures of Ulysses, and he gave it the title Odyssey. He wrote a very long poem and he named it Odyssey. And it talked about the adventures of Ulysses. That was the subject matter. It consisted of 24 books. He wrote 24 books on this particular theme, subject matter. He banished the letter A completely from the first book. He did not use the letter A even once in the entire book. He named it Alpha. Alpha means A. So he simply because he did not use the word A even once in the entire book, he named it Alpha. And in the second book, he did not use B even for once. So this way, he excluded all the 24 letters of the alphabet in the 24 books. The poet had to reject the most appropriate. Now, this is what Addison says is an example of false wheat. Why? The poet had to reject the most appropriate and elegant word in his language. This is quite natural. So if you decide not to use a particular letter or any word that contains that particular letter, so it is quite obvious that you are going to discard a number of words and you have to put some other words which replace those words. So because he did not use A in any of the words, so he must have definitely tried to find out some other words to replace those words. So in this way, the poet had to reject the most appropriate and elegant word, most beautiful word in his language. Like a diamond with a flaw, he makes a comparison. Just as like a diamond with a flaw in it. If the diamond has a flaw, diamond is so precious, it's very precious. If it has a flaw, we don't buy it. Similarly, just as we reject a diamond with a flaw, similarly, he rejected all of those words which contained A in the first book, B in the second book, C in the third book. Now, the essayist is of the opinion that if the work had existed today, the present generation would have given it more importance than they would have given to Odyssey of Homer. Homer, you know, he was a Greek poet. He has written Odyssey. And Tryphoedarus, he also, you know, gave this title Odyssey to his poem, long poem that he wrote. So the essayist says, had that book or had those books existed today, people would have given, the present generation would have given more importance to the book of Tryphoedarus. Then, then he wants to say that those 24 books of Tryphoedarus would have been a storehouse of obsolete words and phrases. Obsolete means words and phrases which are not in use anymore. Unusual barbarisms. Barbarism is the absence of culture. So words which are specific to one's culture. In a particular culture, there are certain culture specific words, certain words are used and certain other words are not used. And then rusticities. Rusticities of a very simple quality or rough in appearance related to the village. Absurd spellings and complicated dialects. So all these things are found in those 24 books. It would have been a storehouse of obsolete words and phrases, unusual barbarisms and rusticities, absurd spellings and complicated dialects. So his 24 books were a storehouse of all these things. So had those 24 books existed, ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଯଦି ସେ 24ଟା ଯାକ ବହି ଆମେ ଆଭେଲେବୁଲ ହୁଅନ୍ତା ମାର୍କେଟରେ, ଲୋକ କହନ୍ତେ ୱା ୱା ୱା, ଆରେ one poet doesn't use a single word in the entire book. So how great he is, what a master he is. Obviously he is a master. But Joseph Addison says, now by doing this kind of a thing, suppose you have an aversion for, aversion is dislike. Suppose you have a dislike for that, letter A. You don't take, you write a book, but in the entire book you don't even use A for a single time, for even once. তাহলে कौन हबो ना गोटे स्पेशल वर्ड को तमे गुडे वर्ड को चेंज करबे को पड़ियो, जो वर्ड ता तमर नॉर्मली गोटे जिंस को बुझौथबो, यू आर नॉट यूजिंग दैट, तो यू हैव टू फाइंड आउट एन अल्टरनेटिव. तेणु अल्टरनेटिव टा जे सदा बेले ठीक हेतिबो से कथा भी नुहे. तेणु सेत पे कहउचंदी जे इट gave rise to something called barbarism. It used obsolete words and phrases which are not in use anymore. It would have been looked upon as one of the most valuable treasuries of the Greek language, most valuable wealth. Had that those 24 books existed today, the present day writers would have said, oh, these books are the best examples of the Greek language, rich storehouses of the Greek language. Thank God they don't exist. So lipogrammatists, they are the first example of false wit that Addison talks about in the second essay. Now, next he says the next example of false wit is rebus. R-E-B-U-S, rebus. What is rebus? What did the lipogrammatists do? They did not use a particular letter in the word. They banned the use of a particular letter in the entire book. But look at these people who used something called rebus. What is this rebus? It doesn't sink a letter but a whole word. The entire word is not written. By substituting a picture in the place of the word. Please try to understand. There they didn't use a particular letter. Lipogrammatists did not use a particular letter. If a word contained that letter, they did not use it. But these people who wrote something called rebus, they did not use the entire word, but they substituted that word with a picture. Caesar was one of the masters of the Roman mint. He says when Caesar was, mint is where coins are made. So what did he do? What did Caesar do? He placed the figure of an elephant upon the reverse of the public money. So where coins were minted, coins were produced. What did he do? He was in charge of that. So what did he do? On the other side, on the reverse of on one side you have the value of the coin printed. On the other side you have a symbol. So what did he do? On the other side, on the reverse of the public money, he placed the figure of an elephant. Why did he do it? The word Caesar in Punic language of Carthage is a city-state. It is an ancient city-state. So there the language that was spoken was Punic language. In Punic language, Caesar meant an elephant. So instead of writing Caesar, now these days you must have seen on the notes, on the notes especially, you find the signature of the Reserve Bank, Governor of the Reserve Bank of India. In some notes, the Finance Secretary puts his signature. So we know who the Finance Secretary was when this note came to be used, or note was published for the first time. Note was minted for the first time, produced for the first time. Similarly, but there, what was the rule? It was not lawful for a private man to stamp his own figure upon the coin of the Commonwealth. So there was a rule. A person, an ordinary person, was not allowed to print his picture, his figure. So he thought of doing it in a different way. He printed an elephant. He embossed an elephant there. And this elephant indirectly in Punic language meant Caesar. So his name appeared there, but in a different way. He didn't write Caesar. Instead, he embossed, he printed an elephant, but intelligent people must have understood the meaning behind it. Marcus Tullius Cicero was a Roman statesman, a lawyer, a scholar, a philosopher. On the nose of one of his ancestors, there was a wen, W-E-N. Vein is a growth or swelling on the skin, like a vetch. Vetch, VETCH. Vetch is a wild plant. So there was a growth which looked like a wild plant. So what did he do? Cicer in Latin means chickpea. Chickpea is a plant. Chickpea is a plant. So Cicero ordered that Cicero's full name was Marcus Tullius Cicero. So he kept the first two words Marcus Tullius. But in place of Cicero, what he did, he placed the figure of a wedge, figure of that plant, so that, so he just wanted that a wedge be inscribed on a public monument. So you write the first two letters, you write the first two words. Then in place of the third word, which is Cicero, you draw a plant, you design a plant, you keep a plant. In the essay says this was done to show that he was neither ashamed of his name or his family. We read of a famous building, another example of rebus. We read of a famous building that was marked in several parts with the figures of a frog and lizard. Now, instead of writing Apple, you must have seen what Apple company does. There is a partly eaten apple. You must have seen that. So once it is there, a big building, and on the facade, on the front side of his, this picture is there. So we understand this is a building which the Apple company owns. So we understand that. Similar is the kind of thing. Similar is the type of thing that was done here in this particular building. In this famous building, on several parts, one found figures of frogs and lizards. Why? Why frogs and lizards? Because those words in Greek were the names of the architect. In Greek, these frogs and frog and lizard meant the name of the architect who had designed this building. So it was the law of the land that the architect cannot write his name. The architect cannot write either his name or the name of his company anywhere in the building. So how would I tell the world that I have designed the building? So I do it in an indirect way. The law of the country didn't permit the architects to write their names upon their works. So look at the clever architect. What he did not write his names. He did not write the name of his company. But what he did, he drew the figures of frog and lizard. Frogs and lizards everywhere. That was the name of the company. The law of the country did not permit the architect to write their names upon the works. So this was the clever way he wrote the name. This was an example of rebus. Another example. The forelock of the horse in antique equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius looks like an owl from a distance. Forelock is the hair that the horse has, the lock of hair just above the forehead. There is a lock of hair here. The horse, you must have seen that, the forehead, and just above the forehead, between the two ears, there is a lock of hair. So the forelock of the horse in the antique equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius. Equestrian statue riding a horse. Statue riding a horse. So that particular statue of Marcus Aurelius, if you mark from a distance, the hair on the forehead of the horse looks like an owl. Pecha bhaliya dekhaଯାଉଛି ଦୂରରୁ ଦେଖିଲେ it's hair, it's a lock of hair, but if you mark from a distance it looks like an owl. କାହିଁକି? Why it was done? The statuary is the person who made the statue, the sculptor. So the statuary was perhaps an Athenian. The rule was, or the law of the land was, the statuary or the person who made the statue could not write his name there anywhere on the work of art. So, how would he show others that he had made it? So, the writer says, or the essayist says, the statuary was perhaps an Athenian, because in Athenian language, this owl, the figure of the owl, referred to or meant or indicated at the name of his company. He was not permitted to write his name anywhere on the work of art, and this was how he did it. The essay says that many of his own countrymen practiced such things for the sake of being called witty. They wanted to be called witty, extremely intelligent, extraordinarily intelligent, brilliant, and therefore they practiced this rebus quite well. He gives the example of Mr. Newbery. Newbery, Newberry. This is the title of a person. So what he did, in order to represent his name by a picture, what he did, he hung up at the door the sign of a yew tree. It is a berry tree, କୋଳି ଗଛ, କୋଳିର ଗଛ, ସେ ଗୋଟେ ସେଥିରୁ ଗୋଟେ ଆଣିକି ଲଗେଇଦେଲେ ଗୋଟେ leaves with berries, a branch of the yew tree, Y-E-W, a branch of the yew tree which had berries in it. And he wrote N in the middle. In the middle, he had a golden N, that letter, hung upon the bough. Bough is branch, B-O-U-G-H, bough is branch, bough of the tree. With the help of a little spelling, he made it Newbery. N, U is the tree, and then there were berries. It was a berry tree, berries were hanging. Just as you have grapes hanging from a bunch. Similarly, these berries were hanging. Finally, the essayist refers to rebus hewn out of, cut out of a free stone and erected over two of the portals of Blenheim House. What is Blenheim House? Blenheim House is the seat of Duke of Marlborough. Different type dukes and duchess. You must have heard, the prince and princesses, the princess and princesses, they are given different titles. They hold different titles. So this was a building where the Duke of Marlborough lived. There was a figure. You know what figure it was? There is the figure of a monstrous lion, a huge lion, tearing to pieces a little cock. A lion and a cock. Instead of directly writing something, out of it was, these two figures were hewn, cut out of. Hewn is cut out of some stone, free stone. A cock, why they did it? A cock in Latin refers to the Frenchman, and lion is the emblem of the English nation. So the English devouring, destroying, cutting into pieces the French people. This was what, instead of directly telling, writing somewhere this, they indirectly showed it through the use of rebus. There is another example of false wit. An echo talking sensibly and giving sensible answers. Echo is a bird, talking bird. Talking bird which talks just as we have parrots here, uttering a few words. Similarly, there are echoes. There is a special kind of a talking bird. The essayist is of the opinion that this device has been widely used by Ovid, Greek poet. He has introduced the echo as a nymph, Nymph, What is a nymph? In ancient Greek folklore, it is a minor female deity, Deity, minor female uh, creature, you can say, divine creature. Uh, so it's a minor female deity. Erasmus, whose full name was Desiderius Erasmus, he was born in Holland. He was a humanist and philosopher. He has also made use of an echo. The echo is able to talk in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. He uses that in such a way that this bird is able to talk in three different languages. So the essay says one bird which can talk in three different languages and which can answer the questions asked to it must be a genius. This bird must be a genius, right? He must be a linguist. He has so much knowledge of three languages, but how is it possible? Now, Hudibras, a vigorous satirical poem written by Samuel Butler, in ridicule of this kind of falsehood, ridicule is making fun of. So Samuel Butler makes fun of this kind of falsehood. He says, "No, this is a falsehood. Using the bird echo to present your views. So that is falsehood." So what does he do? He has described Bruin bewailing the loss of the bear to the solitary echo. So there is a character which is describing or narrating about the loss of his bear to an echo. And what is the echo doing? That bird doing? This bird repeats the lines with him and helps out his words and furnishes him with rhymes. So it not only helps him, repeats the lines that are spoken by, uh, you know, Bruin, it helps out his words, provides certain clues also, helps the narrator, and furnishes him with lines. He helps him with certain lines. So, here in this particular essay, in the second essay, Joseph Addison talks about three things which he considers falsehoods, examples of falsehoods. The first one is lipogrammatist. The first one is lipogrammatist. He says that is an example of falsehood. Then he says rebus, gives example of rebus and how rebus has been used by different people, different writers at different periods of time. That he gives examples of that. And then he talks about echo, the talking bird. So he says use of these are examples of falsehood. So friends, thank you very much. I hope this helps you. Thank you.